Now, I want to turn to a subject related to the Republic of Ireland, because I've become really interested in Irish politics over the past few years, partly because I realised how little I knew about the history of the Republic of Ireland and indeed its politics. So what do you do when you don't know much about something? You edit a book about it. So I've edited a book about all of the different, 16 different men who've been Taoiseach of the Republic of Ireland since 1922. And that's really taught me a hell of a lot about the country and its history. So when I saw this story today about the Chief Rabbi saying that Irish political leaders have contributed to hatred against Jews, my ears pricked up. Whatever the I equivalent of ears pricking up is, that happened. Because I thought, well, this is actually quite a difficult moment, I think, in relations between the Republic of Ireland and Israel, because the Republic of Ireland has adopted a very anti-Israel stance over the past 18 months or so. They expressed sympathy with the State of Israel over the October the 7th attacks, but they've consistently taken a very anti-Israel line, a very pro-Palestinian line. They've become one of the few countries in Europe to recognise the Palestinian state alongside Norway. They also spoke up publicly in favour of the South African action at the ICC, indicting Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. Now, the Israelis are very, very unhappy with this, as you can imagine. And then a couple of weeks ago, Israel decided to close its embassy in Dublin and withdraw its ambassador. So some pretty bad feelings between both of the states. Well, this has had consequences because, according to the Chief Rabbi, he says Jewish children in Irish schools are hiding their heritage from their fellow pupils because anti-Israel sentiment is so strong across the country. Now, Yoni Vida, who is the Chief Rabbi, said that many of the roughly 3,000 Jews in Ireland no longer felt safe enough to wear signs of their identity, such as skullcaps or the Star of David, on the streets. He said there have been a significant rise in anti-Semitism since the October the 7th terror attacks and Israel's war in Gaza. Now, Ireland's support for the Palestinians and fierce criticism of Israel has seen it clash with Netanyahu's government, which closed its embassy in Dublin this week, as I say. Gideon Saar, Israel's foreign minister, accused the Taoiseach, Simon Harris, of being an anti-Semite after the Irish premier said the embassy closure was to distract from the killing of children in Gaza. Well, Rabbi Vida, speaking to the Telegraph, said of late many Jews are not comfortable to display signs of their Jewish identity outside their homes, as is traditional, or to wear things like a Star of David or a Jewish skull cup when walking the streets. What I'm most upset and concerned about is the number of school children who have told me in recent months that they feel afraid because they're Jewish, or that they avoid talking about being Jewish in front of their non-Jewish peers. Now, I know we have lots of listeners in the Republic of Ireland, so I'd love to hear from you, get your reaction to this. Do you think the actions of your government have exacerbated this situation, or do you think, no, actually, they have every right to take the stance that they've taken? And to people who are listening in the United Kingdom, is this happening here? If you are Jewish, are you now in a situation that you never thought you'd be in, where you feel that you can't make public displays of your religion? What do you put that down to? Is it how the war in Israel and Gaza is being reported in the media? Is it due to the politics of Israel, the politics of this country? Do you think it'll ever change? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Well, let's talk to Alan Shatter, who is an Irish lawyer, author and former Fine Gael Minister for Justice and Equality and former Minister of Defence between 2011 and 2014. Alan, thank you for joining us on LBC. Now, you've been writing about this, I believe. What's your reaction to what the Chief Rabbi has said?
Well, firstly, I entirely agree with the Chief Rabbi's depiction of where we are now in Ireland. Criticism of Israel, of course, isn't of itself anti-Semitic, nor is criticism of the Israeli government. 3/4 of the population of Israel are regularly critical of the Israeli government. The issue is essentially the extreme nature of the anti-Israeli narrative, which is promoted by the Irish government. The inflammatory language consistently used by Ireland's Taoiseach, Prime Minister Simon Harris, and by Ireland's Foreign Minister Micheál Martin. The extent to which that's validating what was in the past covert anti-Semitic sentiment that has become overt on the streets of Dublin, and the completely unbalanced critique of Israel, which extraordinarily since October 7, 2023, has been accompanied by the Irish government embracing and further deepening its relationship with Iran, something that seems to have been gone largely unnoticed on the international stage, in circumstances in which Iran is the central malign force in the Middle East advocating Israel's destruction. It uses its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis and other fanatical Islamic groups, some located in Iraq, some formerly located in Syria, that in recent days have found their circumstances changing. It's quite extraordinary that the Irish government should have further deepened its relationship with Iran to the extent...
How have they done that?
Last September, well, in September, just gone, 2-3 months ago, they opened an embassy in Tehran. The Irish political parties that you referenced in your introduction, your knowledge of Ireland and Ireland's politics. Well, last spring, each of the Irish political parties, including the government parties, held their annual party political conferences, no different to the political conferences held in England by the Labour Party, Conservative Party and others. In each of the Irish political parties' conferences, including the conferences of the government parties, the Iranian ambassador to Ireland was an honoured guest, and the Israeli ambassador to Ireland was boycotted. She wasn't invited to all but one of the conferences. The one conference she was invited to was that of the Prime Minister's party, the current Prime Minister's party, Fine Gael, of which I used to be a member, and that invitation was cancelled, and the Irish Prime Minister used his conference as an opportunity to, on a very personal basis, attack Israel's Prime Minister in the presence of the Iranian ambassador. So Ireland has become an outlier in Europe in the extreme nature of its criticism of Israel. And in May last, together with Spain and Norway, announced its recognition of the state of Palestine, which was perceived by many people as a reward for the terrorist atrocities perpetrated by Hamas in October 2023, and Hamas's continuing firing of rockets at Israel since that date.
See, it seems very odd because on the face of it, you look at Micheál Martin, you look at Simon Harris, and you think, well, both perfectly reasonable, moderate people, and yet everything you've described in this conversation points to the very opposite.
Everything I've described is simply factual. It's not a matter of opinion. When you look at the two major political parties that were part of the outgoing Irish government and which are going to form the main centre of the incoming new government, they were both in the context, I think, of European or UK politics, be perceived as centrist parties. They're centrist in everything save for their approach to the state of Israel, their political pronouncements, their unbalanced presentations of what are very complex background circumstances. In those contexts, they've adopted the extreme narrative of Sinn Féin and other left-wing parties in the Irish opposition. I suppose you could best depict the policies adopted by the Irish two government parties with regard to Israel as replicating the narrative of Jeremy Corbyn when leader of the Labour Party, a narrative he still adheres to while on the outer edges of UK politics.
Now, Ireland doesn't have a massive Jewish population, but the Chief Rabbi is clearly worried about the consequences for this, that people, he says, Jews are no longer feel safe to wear signs of identity like skull caps or the Star of David on the streets. Now, I suspect that is very much the same in this country. Our government, our previous government, our current government haven't gone down the road that the Irish government have. But there are many people, Jewish people in this country, who are feeling unsafe at the moment. Do you think that's going to change in the immediate future?
I think it should be said that, fortunately, so far in Ireland, the sort of physical violence on the streets towards members of the Jewish community that has occurred in the UK and in London has largely been absent. We have had one violent incident, which is attributed to anti-Semitism, that the police are investigating. But much of the concern of the Jewish community is generated by weekly marches that took place on the Irish streets, which were, in theory, pro-Palestinian marches, but which evolved into not just anti-Israeli marches, but the use of anti-Semitic narratives when all you really had to do was substitute the word Jewish for Zionist as it was deployed. They became effectively interchangeable. The chanting was seen as threatening. There were basically calls for the destruction of the Israeli state. Hamas, Hezbollah, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine flags were waved. But there's also an underlying a series of underlying issues and problems. Irish social media is a cesspit of anti-Semitism, and much of what's posted on it directed at Irish Jewish people can be identified substantially as originating in Ireland. Some originates from outside Ireland. Within the Irish education system, we were talking about school children earlier. Within the Irish education system, school books have been contaminated by completely inaccurate depictions of the State of Israel, of the Jewish religion, to the extent that what is now being taught in schools could be regarded as anti-Semitic. A group of teachers in Ireland have formed an organisation called Teachers for Palestine, and have put an unofficial school curriculum available on the internet back in March, in which they encourage be taught at all schools in both primary and secondary level. This particular narrative, as displayed, is designed in completely distorting the background to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to the extent of brainwashing children in schools. That has resulted in Jewish children in a small number of Irish schools feeling threatened, being bullied, parents having to pull the children out of those schools. And despite this issue being brought to the attention of the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, and the Department of Education, they have studiously ignored taking any action of any description to address this issue. And very recently there was a report into Irish school textbooks and school materials which highlighted the inaccuracies and prejudice within it. For example, in one particular page in a book widely used within our school system, Auschwitz was referenced as a prisoner of war camp, and the Jewish religion was depicted as a religion dedicated to war, whereas Islam was a religion depicted as dedicated to peace.
I don't know how these books ever get published, but there we are. Alan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Alan Shatter, the former Fine Gael Minister for Defence. Well, there's so many questions arising out of this. We can concentrate on the Irish angle, but let's translate it towards the United Kingdom as well, because there'll be many Jewish parents who feel very similar to Irish Jewish parents, that they are nervous about their children wearing outward signs of Jewish identity when walking the streets, even children going to school, even a school uniform that identifies their children as being of a Jewish school. I suspect that's a problem. Now, is this something that's, to an extent, always existed? Or do you think it's been completely, I was going to say enhanced, that's the wrong word, exaggerated by the events of the last 18 months? And let's also remember that we should not be conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. We should be using terms correctly. And I'm not so sure whether the Chief Rabbi here is right when he's accusing the Irish Taoiseach of anti-Semitism here. Saying that you recognise a Palestinian state, to me, is not a sign of somebody who's anti-Semitic. It is a sign of somebody who wants to see a two-state solution. So we do have to use our words carefully here, because words count, don't they? So let's try and have, over the next 40 minutes, a rational, a calm discussion over the situation that Jewish people find themselves in, both in the Republic of Ireland and in the United Kingdom. How has it come to this? Are the actions of our respective governments almost inadvertently promoting these things? And should both governments be doing more to combat it?